Okay, in the last video I showed you how to solve percents using proportions. Now there are other ways you can solve percent problems. Most people like to do it this way, solving using algebra. And again, I don't really care which method you use. You can pick whichever one you like. Each method kind of depends on what the problem is. So solving by algebra, some people like it a little bit better because it's more efficient. So I lined out three simple rules for you. So I said solving percents using algebra. Percents must be changed into decimals. Okay, so if you're going to use this method, your percents have to be decimals. So refer back to the earlier video on how to change a percent to a decimal, but it's pretty easy. You just move the decimal 2 spots to the left. To change it back, obviously the inverse, 2 spots to the right. The key word here, as we've talked about this before, of in math lingo means multiply. So when you're trying to find the percentage of something, you multiply it by that percentage. Another big one math lingo wise is. Is means equals. Okay, so let's look at those same problems we did the last time, except we'll take it from a different perspective. Okay, give myself some more space here. Okay, so look, and again, here's probably the most classic proportion application you can deal with is finding the percentage of a number. So again, what is 35% of 20? So we look right here, they're laying out a formula for you. They said what is, so is means equals 35% of 20, so times 20. So what, in this case, this will be the x, the unknown. Okay, remember the x right there means times, that's not this x, is equals 35%, so I got to make that 0.35 of 20. Now when I do multiplication, I put it in parentheses. That's just the algebra part of my brain. I can't get over that. That just means multiply. If you want to put the x in for times, that's fine, okay? But just know in any video from here on out, when I'm signifying multiplication, I'm going to use parentheses. Okay, so for this one, all we have to do to solve for x is just multiply them. And that's why a lot of people like the proportions method better than, sorry, I got that backwards. A lot of people like the algebra way better than proportions because it's simpler and it's less cluttered. Okay, I'm going to cheat and use my calculator here. Let's see, so we take 0.35 and I times that by 20 and we get our answer of 7. So if you remember the last video, or if you watched the proportions one, that's what we got for the last one too, 7. Okay, so for that one, this will be the quickest calculation every single time. And if you're good with algebra, just do it this way. Okay, you don't have to do it the proportions way. No one's forcing you to do it that way. So let's go to this one. So they said 15 is what percent of 20? So if I translate this into algebra lingo, they're saying 15 is, so that means 15 equals what percent of 50? So what percent, that implies that's my x, the unknown, of 50, so times 50. Now if you remember, you can multiply in any order. So I know if you're kind of interpreting this literally, some people put x times 50, but in math terms, in algebra terms, you can write that as 50x, and that means the same thing. Okay, so now we look at this one. Here's where I think if you don't have a solid algebra background, here's where you can get in a little bit of trouble, or you can kind of forget things. So 50x means 50 times x, and we want to know what x is. Well, to solve for x, we divide by 50. Okay, here's where I think proportions outshines algebra a little bit if you're not familiar with the algebra method. So then we take this 15 divided by 50. Okay, again, I'm going to cheat and use my calculator here just to make sure I get the number right. Let's see, so 15 divided by 50, that gives me 0.3. Okay, now the answer is not, now the answer we get is 0.3. Okay, but we look at this one, 0.3%, that's kind of ridiculous because if you have 15 of 50, we have more than 0.3%. So what we got to do is you got to take that 0.3 and you got to make it a whole number. So we move, or make it a percentage. Move the decimal over twice, so this is actually 30%, okay, which seems like a more feasible answer. So when you're looking at this one, if you're looking for the percentage, you got to remember to change it back, moving that decimal over twice. Okay, let's go to the last example here. 17 is 2% of what number? So we look at this one, they said 17 is, so that's the equal, 2% of what number? So that means 2% times something. Okay, so when we look at this one, write this down. Let's see, we got 17 equals 2%, so I'm going to write that as 0.02. Remember, to change any decimal into a percentage, you move it over twice. And don't put 0.2 in here, it's 0.02. Because if I put 0.2 in there, all of a sudden I put 20% and not 2%. So really, really common mistake. They said of what number, so we can just represent that as 0.02x. And just like this one, I want to figure out what x is. Well, what's preventing x from being by itself? The 0.02. What's the 0.02 doing to x? It's timesing, so I divide to undo it. So we take 0.02 and divide that into 17. You might remember that from the last video, or even the proportions method. It's still the same solving method. You actually do that a lot in algebra. Okay, so then we divide 0.02 into 17. That's going to give you a really, really big number because we're taking a really small amount and putting it into a big amount. So we do 17 divided by 0.02, and we get 850. Okay, so then let's write that in here. Let's do 850. Okay, so so the algebra way, it's just a different way of looking at stuff. Some people find this a little bit simpler because it's less involved in proportions, but I think the only real example where algebra kind of outshines the other two is this one right here, or outshines proportions, is that example, because it's less work. And generally when you're finding percentages of numbers, this is the easiest way to do it. These two, it's not bad, but I think it's the same amount of work as proportions, but ultimately you can decide for yourself. But I just kind of wanted to give you two different avenues of solving problems, because I know some people like to do proportions, other people just love to do it this way, and they're adamant about doing this way. And just, I guess, disclaimer notice, I don't care which one you use. If you want to solve it by proportions, great. If you want to solve it by using the algebraic method in this video, great. Okay? As long as you're understanding what you're finding and that your answer makes sense. Okay, that's the main thing here.